This one's going to be a little bit different. Got a lot of things that are on my mind. A recent experience that I wanted to share. This is going to be a bit difficult. I got a lot to say, a lot I've been thinking about. I have 13 days left in Bali, and it's been a good experience, which isn't to say that it's easy. It hasn't been easy. Videos that people see maybe make it look like it's all fun, and I don't want to provoke envy or jealousy. It's also been a really big challenge. It's not something I would recommend everybody just go and do. Quit your job and run away for months of travel. I did ayahuasca. I feel like my travel through Bali, that it was sort of leading in a certain direction of experience and revelation. The ayahuasca ceremony was a high point and consistent with the direction of the path. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on. That experience and also just my experience traveling alone for the last 2.5 months informs the subject of this podcast, and we're going to deal with some different subject matter this time. One of the things I want to talk about, it's a strange place to start. I actually want to see if anyone else has felt this way, if anyone else has experienced this, and so I'm going to put this at the front just in case people turn this off halfway through, which is reasonable. Ever since I was a kid, and from a pretty early age, I think from the earliest age that you remember, so around 3-4 years old, and since, and less frequently as I got older, I've had this experience, sensation comes over me, and sometimes it happens in dreams. And that's when I think it's the most profound, and sometimes it happens while I'm awake. It almost washes over you like a wave of vertigo, but it's not vertigo. And I want to describe it and see if anyone else has felt this way, and especially my brother Ed, whom I think might have experienced this or might not have, but if anyone has, it would be him. But I had this sensation of something so massive, and I feel it in my head, in my mind, in my chest. This is not an ayahuasca experience, and it's this feeling of this massive volume and this massive movement or velocity, which is simultaneously so slow because it's so big, but because it's so big, it's also infinitely fast. It feels like this strange contradiction tied together by a mass that feels infinite, and it's just this feeling. Imagine that you have a clock. As the hands of the clock turn, the velocity as you move out from the center of the arms increases. Even though you have a single arm that's theoretically moving all as one, the end of the arm is actually traveling much faster than the base of the arm. It almost feels like that, like imagine a massive, like an infinitely large clock, and towards the center it is slow, and towards the exterior it is impossibly fast. It feels like what I would expect the inertia of the expansion of the universe feeling. This is something that I've felt my entire life. It's not something that I just came across. But I wanted to ask people if they've ever felt anything like that, because when it washes over me, it's unlike anything else. In the day leading up to ayahuasca, I didn't know that I was going to have the opportunity to participate in the ceremony until about 18 hours beforehand. It didn't give me a lot of time to prepare. A lot of dietary preparation is necessary, psychological preparation too. They recommend 2 weeks of a restricted diet, no caffeine, no alcohol, no salt, no oil, no spicy food, no sugar. I didn't have the opportunity to prepare for 2 weeks. I did my best, and so I fasted the day of. It was kind of challenging towards the end, mostly just because of the hunger. About an hour before the ceremony, of the mind, I just want a fucking cheeseburger. I don't care about ayahuasca, I want to eat. I went reluctantly. As I approached, had they canceled it, I would have been fine with it. I would have gone and got a cheeseburger. The room is fairly dark. There were 3 men there, all of which were gifted musicians, 2 of which were shamans. One was leading the ceremony and the other 2 were in support. Moments of song that would break out, and moments of silence and moments of breathing, and there was guidance. One of the first things that happened when I began to feel the effects was I got up and I went outside, and there was a full moon and all of these things. One of the shaman directed me to not open my eyes and not look outside, but to keep my eyes closed and to stay internal self-discovery and looking at your own soul, which is definitely what it feels like. The music really provoked a lot of emotion. It helped bring you through the journey. Some of the feelings were more voluntary, some were less. It was It was profound. Because I feel like I learned a lot, and I feel like all the stuff that I learned was obvious. You're going to think that, yeah, of course. The things that are closest to us are sometimes the most obscured. The ayahuasca experience really helped expose a lot of those things. Okay, so let's move on to some of those things. I imagine it's different for everybody. It seems to give you an unfiltered access to your subconscious, or passage between the subconscious and the conscious, so that you can become aware of things that you already know. And that was my experience, and it almost gave me the ability to just go through memories, almost like you're scrubbing the timeline back and forth and just stop here and go back there. It really felt like I could just sort of fly from one memory to another and to go into these spots. Learn, I think, a lot about yourself, and you also learn about other people, I think, and what their experiences are, what their perspective was, or how you treated them and how that impacted them. In many ways, it was a very sad experience. A lot of what I processed was how I've hurt people, and how to love people, the people I love, the people I've loved, and the people I've hurt. How I hurt them and why they were hurt and what their experience must have been. My fear of inadequacy and my fear of comparing myself to other people is related both to how I do get in my own way. I usually dismantle an opportunity or an idea out of fear. Out of or a pessimism that no, it doesn't work, no, I don't get to do that, no, I can't do that, no, I'm not capable of it, which are all born in fear. That same fear has a relationship with anger. I didn't know this, but I really walked around thinking that my anger, I'm pretty angry, and I get angry out of nowhere. It's abstract and it's confusing to a lot of the people. It's almost a schizophrenic kind of anger, change on a dime. In 1 second, from being a rational person to a crazy person. I realize now that the reason that it was so persistent was because I thought it was a strength, and I certainly used it as a tool, that I could get angry and bulldoze my way through a lot of problems. Subconsciously, I was walking around thinking that my anger was a strength, and it's not. It's my greatest weakness. It's not difficult to admit that it's a weakness. It's difficult to admit that I thought it was a strength. I'm not going to indulge it anymore. I'm not going to be angry anymore. I'm going to forgive all the people that I was angry at, and I'm going to forgive myself. You can't forgive someone if you're still angry, if you still resent them. And so now I understand that anger is the thing. Obvious, right? I realized that I betrayed myself. I slowly fell into that betrayal. I think it was kind of a process that I went through in my 20s into my 30s, where I think I gave up my ideals. I let it contaminate all of my relationships, who I was, but really who I wanted to be. What I've realized is that I owe it to the people I love, and I owe it to my brothers, to give them my best. And I think that we all owe the people we love the best version of ourselves. And I'm going to try to find that again. I think I've given a lot of people the worst version of myself for a long time. And that's over. The last revelation that I had, this is common in ayahuasca experiences, the feeling of being part of something larger than yourself. It feels like another dimension. It feels like a higher dimension, which I esteem to be grounded in science and facts and reality. But one of the things that became clear to me was that there is a lower realm and there is a higher realm. If we think about it this way, simulation theory, through video games and computer processing and these things, we can engineer universes. We're doing it. You might argue that the brain is really its own universe. It's the one that you live in. It's where conscious experience lives. Given enough time and the proper technology, we may actually simulate a universe in a computer or whatever else. If we can, we're definitely going to. We should assume that it's already been done by other species. And the fact that in this universe we haven't simulated an equivalent universe yet, and there is a hierarchy, let's say, of universe simulates a universe, simulates a universe, simulates a universe. If that hierarchy exists, we're likely at the bottom of it because we haven't simulated a universe yet. Beneath us is the universe we may simulate. You might look at that as a form of hell or purgatory. Musk and other people have described building AI or summoning AI as summoning the demon. If we were to summon AI through engineering in this universe, it would be summoning it from this lower dimension. Hierarchically, it's beneath us. So what's above us? What it felt like during this ayahuasca trip was the conscious experience and the emotional experience is access to the realm above us, if there is one. If we're living in a simulation, it almost feels like consciousness is broadcast to us from that simulation. I think a part of me grew up fast because of some of the experiences of my childhood and challenges with my stepfather and my mother and being an older brother. And I think a lot of older siblings maybe are forced to grow up in certain ways. And I've been thinking about this, and I've been looking at friends who've now had children and how that forces them to grow up or allows them to evolve and grow up. I have a friend who lost both of his parents in his early 20s, and he had a child early on as well and has had children since. That forced him to grow up in ways that I was never forced to. Listening to Jordan Peterson, one of his things that he repeats is grow the hell up, take responsibility, grow the hell up. And I've always considered myself to be grown up and be responsible. That's something that I lost. I got sidetracked in it, and I realized that there's certain ways in which I've never grown up and I haven't taken responsibility. A lot of people will ask me, why you always wear a hat? Why I always wear a hat? I always tell people it's because I'm bald. That's a simple truth. It's not very layered. I think all of us have a thing about us we don't like. You know, I don't want to make this about being bald. I think that probably everyone has something like that. And when that thing is exposed, that thing they don't like about themselves is on display, it prevents them from being themselves. Dumbo's feather, you know, is one of those things, and Peter Pan's Tinkerbell is one of those things. And the hat is one of those things. But when I do interact with no hat on, I tend to be more guarded, I tend to be more quiet and conservative and, you know, speak less and be a bit less open. And when I put the hat on, you know, I can sort of be myself. And that's part of why I wear it during the podcast. It's part of why I wear it in certain contexts where I need to be social and fluid and just be myself. Still gonna wear a hat once in a while. Maybe less often in the future, we'll see. The final thing I want to talk about, the subconscious of dreams, the collective unconscious, and its relationship with art. Something that I learned from Carl Jung's book, and something that Jordan Peterson also talks a lot about, which really kind of struck me. I've just finished my second book. It doesn't matter what happens with it, you know, if I get it self-published or real published or whatever, because it's an honest expression. And I want to talk about the subconscious and the collective unconscious and its relationship with this piece of work that I've finished. So I heard Jordan Peterson talk about certain Disney films and how Pinocchio or The Lion King were films that were sort of an honest expression and touched upon archetypes and themes and truths because they weren't trying to. In a way, they're like dreams. So you're not trying to think about a thing, you're not trying to be anything. It's the subconscious, and it's unfiltered by conscious intent. You get a window into what your values are, what you're processing, or what your fears, or what pathology is haunting you. And then there's the collective unconscious, and this is my understanding of it. As we communicate to one another in society and we interact and we share the zeitgeist cultural position that we're all in and the state of our collective consciousness, which is a real thing, and it's become an even more real thing with the internet and with telecommunications and cell phones. There is not just our own individual subconscious, but a collective unconscious. When art is truly art, it's when it's not trying to be this message or that message, when it's just an unfiltered expression of the artist's interpretation of the collective unconscious. And it isn't a function of interpretation in the way that the artist thinks about what is the collective unconscious right now. Okay, I'm going to try to interpret that. It's an honest and unbiased excretion of their experience of that collective unconscious and where they stand in it, much like a dream. And so art, according to Jordan Peterson and according to Carl Jung, it's not trying to be something, it's a natural expression from the subconscious and from the collective unconscious, almost as a dream. And this book for better or worse, is absolutely that. I think there are a lot of consistent themes in it that I didn't try to program into it. This book has absolutely come from a nightmare inside of me. As I finish a book, it's not inside me anymore. You know, it's a way of passing it. I'm gonna leave it there. If you've stuck with me this long, I appreciate it. This podcast has been a bit more of a journal for myself and a processing of thoughts. And if you get something from it, good. And if you never got this far, that's okay. Please subscribe, like the video, and we'll talk to you soon.